Okay, so we're going to go over chapter 14, which is fetal assessment. Fetal assessment, obviously you're going to start assessment much before, but first of all, at 18 weeks is when you should have quickening with the ability to monitor the actual movement of the fetus and count hour to hour at 28 weeks. This is monitoring fetal movement, so it should be 10 times in 3 hours. And there's a little way that the mother can track and see exactly how many times the fetus moves. So again, movement starts at 18 weeks, and then 28 weeks they should be really able to mark when movement has occurred. And it just kind of gives the mother a sense of well-being and an assessment as to if the fetus is doing all right. So you can start monitoring after 28 weeks. And there's a couple of other things you can do. So we have ultrasound, which can be used throughout the pregnancy. And initially, the ultrasound is going to verify pregnancy. It can be transabdominal or transvaginal. So obviously, you're not going to do transvaginal if there's complications or already at the risk of premature labor or bleeding or anything of that nature. So there's some contradictions to that. But you can do ultrasound to identify a pregnancy, and then it can be done throughout the course of the pregnancy to detect certain abnormalities in the fetus. So transabdominal, obviously, you're going to be doing it abdominally. You have to do it with a full bladder, so that can be uncomfortable for a mother. And then transvaginal, obviously, you get a better picture because you're closer, but not always the best option for some mothers. So the ultrasound can be as soon as 5 to 6 weeks after last menstrual period. So 5 to 6 weeks after last menstrual period is when the ultrasound will be effective to verify pregnancy. Not that the HCG wouldn't be, but anyways. They can detect abnormalities, especially bone or facial abnormalities in older moms, which of course is an issue after you're 35. You're at higher risk for abnormalities. Spinal bifida, things like that. All right, so another test that they can run, and I'm going to write this down, is your nuclear translucent testing. Basically, what we're testing here for is the plasma protein, and that plasma protein, I won't go too much into it, but the plasma protein would identify if the fetus has a probability or possibility of trisomies 13, 18, and 21. So, and again, it's not foolproof. There's obviously some errors with it, but that's one of the ways that they can look at it. You also have umbilical, let me write that. Umbilical, ICAL, umbilical voltimetry. Basically, it measures the blood flow to the fetus, and it's doing it over systolic over diastolic, almost like you would do a BP. Well, like you would do a BP. But basically, you're trying to make sure that you identify any issues with the placenta not getting enough blood flow to the fetus, which would cause small for gestational age. So you might end up with a small fetus or one that scores below 7 on your APGAR. If there's a significant issue there, then they might determine that they need to just go ahead and induce labor. But it's basically measuring the amount of blood flow that the fetus gets. So the and again, it will result in small for gestational age, which makes sense if the fetus isn't getting the nutrients that it needs and the blood that it needs, and it's not going to grow properly. Non-stress test. So non-stress test assesses fetal well-being off of the fetal heart rate and the movement. So you're looking at the fetal heart rate and the movement of the fetus. Obviously, there's plenty of issues with this because it's not very exact. You're just looking to see if the fetus is moving and the fetal heart rate. And you're using those two variables to determine whether or not the fetus is in a good state. Obviously, if not, then you would have to go in for further testing. But It's quick. It's in the office. It's non-invasive, so that's the benefits of it. But you have to stay very still for 20 minutes in order to do that non-stress test. Now, being reactive in this test means that the fetus is moving 2 accelerations and in the heart rate, and it just means that the fetus is doing well. So being reactive to the non-stress test means that the fetus has accelerations at least 2 times during that period. So obviously non-reactive for a non-stress test is bad, and they'll do further assessment for that. They might do a biophysical profile, and we'll go over that acceleration in a second. The biophysical profile, it looks at several factors. So it looks at fetal breathing movement, and obviously the fetus is not breathing, but it does the movement so that when it's born, it has that capability. So it's almost like it's doing pre-training. Fetal breathing movement, because all it's really doing is making fluid go in and out. But anyways, body, limbs, and fetal tone. And this is exactly like doing the APGAR, but in utero. So body and limbs, and the amount of amniotic fluid, which that's important. The amount of amniotic fluid, reactive heart rate. All right, so basically you're looking for, when you do the biophysical profile, you're looking for the fetus's breathing movements, you're looking for fetal tones, you're looking for a body and the limbs, lower extremities, upper extremities movement, you're looking for amniotic fluid and a reactive heart rate. So when you add those together, it's a scoring system just like the APGAR, and it goes up to 10. So each one of those, because there's 5 obviously, is 2, and you can score it that way. So that's the biophysical profile. And they're going to look at this. For instance, if you do this non-stress test and it becomes non-reactive, then you will go to that biophysical profile, which is much more in depth. So let's talk about accelerations really quick, because that was very confusing to me initially. So they keep saying early decel, late decel, variable decel, all these other things. So essentially it looks like this. When we're looking at the fetal heart rate, it might be going here, and then all of a sudden it spikes up, and it spikes up, and it spikes up. So this is your fetal heart rate, and you're looking for some type of movement. So that fetal heart rate is looking at movement. The fetus is doing something. If it's very steady, and again, it might just be that the fetus is asleep because it's on a different sleep pattern, and that's very possible. But you're looking for these accelerations, okay? Obviously, if accelerations is up in the fetal heart rate, then decelerations is down in the fetal heart rate. So on your chart, it would just go straight down. So that's not good. That indicates that something's happening that reduces the amount of blood flow to the fetus. So when you look at it, now during labor, or when you do a stress test, during labor, you're going to have the fetal heart rate, and it's going to go down. Fetal heart rate, and it's going to go down. Fetal heart rate, and it's going to go down. These going down should line up with the contractions, and I'll write the contractions in blue, so, or pink. So here is maybe I won't write it in that color, because that doesn't appear to right. Okay, there we go. So your contractions, you want them to be in line here. So there's a contraction, okay? You want that deceleration to be in line with the contraction. If, for instance, that contraction is after the fact or before the deceleration, then that's where they look at having an issue. This would be considered variable right here, and that's okay. That's a late decel. So if you had the contraction and the fetal heart rate drops after the contraction, that would be referred to as a late deceleration, and you need to look at some of the blood flow that go into the fetus. If, for instance, the deceleration occurs before the contraction, all right, so the fetal heart rate drops, but the contraction hasn't occurred yet, If it occurs after the fact, then again, you're talking about early deceleration, and that's something that you need to look at. All right, so that's the deceleration and acceleration. Non-stress test, like I said, reactive is good on a non-stress test. Reactive is good on a non-stress test. And I say that because there's another test we're going to look at, and it's opposite. And so I just want to clarify that. All right. So contraction stress test. Okay, obviously there's some downfalls to creating contractions to be able to assess the baby. So this contraction stress test, basically you want to see how the fetus does under the contraction. There's going to be plenty of reasons why this might be contradictory. Obviously, if they're at risk for preterm labor, or they have cervical change or things like that, then you might be concerned here. So positive is bad. So if this is where positive is bad. So let's think about this. The contraction stress test means that how does the fetus react when we conduct the stress test? Because it should react like it rebounds back up after the contraction. There shouldn't be a whole bunch of flex there. The fetus should still be fine. If they're positive, that's bad. The non-stress test positive is good. So that's why I wanted to clarify that. Anyways, obviously you're going to use Pitocin, which is your oxytocin, your synthetic oxytocin. And then, of course, don't do it in the event that there's complications in the pregnancy, bleeding, and things of that nature. All right, the lungs are considered to be mature at 36 weeks. That's important. Lungs are good at 36 weeks. Viability, of course, is different. But lungs are good at 36 weeks. They might do an amniocentesis. Amniocentesis are going to draw out 15 to 20 milliliters of amniotic fluid. And that can be done in different ways. It can be done either through the abdominal or vaginal area. It doesn't seem to make a difference. But basically what they can do with that amniocentesis is they can run tests off of the amniotic fluid and to include DNA tests on the fetuses looking for abnormalities. But you can also determine if the lungs are mature enough for birth. So this you would have to wait until about 15 to 16 weeks. So the downfall is that you have to wait a while to be able to do the amniocentesis. And when they are checking for lung maturity, they're looking for a couple of different types of proteins. So let me write that. Lecithin and sphygmomyelin. That's quite a mouthful. Sphygmomyelin. And it's a ratio. Basically, it's two compounds that are found or part of the surfactant. Of course, surfactant is something that makes our lungs create less friction in our lungs, and you need it to be able to breathe for the newborn. So that's what surfactant is looking at. So these are two of the properties, two of the proteins, or actually I believe, either way, it's part of the properties of surfactant. And so when they look at the amniocentesis, they're seeing this ratio of the sphygmomyelin and lethomyelin to see if this surfactant is present. Obviously, you can give medication to mature lungs, but that's what we're looking for here. The other thing that they can do is look at and this is for lung maturity as well, lamellar body count. And they're basically looking for a number which ranges from 30,000 to 40,000, and that's only present when surfactant is present. It's not part of surfactant. It's just predicts lung maturity off the phospholipids. So that's all it is. All right, the quadruple screen. The quadruple screen tests for trisomies 21 and 18 and neural tube defects. Again, you're going to look at older women for that. So it might be something that you just do as part of an assessment for an older mother. All right, so the chronicovili coronotic villus, I had that wrong, sampling, CVS, is going to take part of the placenta, and it can be done during the first trimester, so the advantage here is that it can be done far earlier than amniocentesis. And you can do this transabdominally or vaginally. It cannot detect neural tube defects, so that's the downfall. You're not going to figure out if there's any neural tube defects. But you can do it a lot earlier, so you can figure out if there's anything, any abnormalities, and give the mother a little bit more options. All right, so that is the major concept out of chapter 14. And it's mainly going to be looking at those tests and just being familiar with those tests. So we will go on from there.